Welcome back to another episode of the Detection Opportunities podcast. Today, we're going to be going over a really cool topic about applying AI, LLMs, and prompt engineering to the field of cybersecurity. I'm excited to have with me today Dylan Williams, who will be going over all the cool things that we're working on with regards to all of the things in this space, AI, LLMs, prompt engineering, and actually leveraging these tools for practical use cases in cybersecurity, specifically for threat detection. And we'll actually go over some practical use cases like using a threat intel blog or post and turning that into actionable insights and detections for your own customized environment, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get into the video. Hey Dylan, how's it going?
Good. It's going pretty good. How are you?
I am recovering from whatever technical difficulties just happened there with StreamYard because that has never happened before. But I'm excited to kick this off. I appreciate your patience. But with that being said, let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about AI, LLMs, prompt engineering, and all that fun stuff. And I'm doing this because I've been seeing, your posts, for quite a while now on like, very really cool use cases for artificial intelligence, LLMs, and all that stuff for cybersecurity, threat detection, and various use cases. And I've been kind of like following, the applications of AI to our field, but it's been very hard to like find people who are actually applying it in ways that are actually, reasonable and usable. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to like have a conversation with you, who's, doing this, I think, fairly well. And that being said, let's get started with who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure, totally. So, yeah, I guess in a nutshell, I'm a blue teamer, right? So that's kind of been my whole career in cyber. So I guess we're coming up on 10-ish years now. But yeah, it started out like it's pretty much everything under the umbrella of SecOps, right? So that's just detection and response. But yeah, like a majority of the work that I do now is primarily around, threat hunting or detection writing around like cloud native stuff. You can throw forensics, call it what you want, all that sort of stuff in there. So yeah, that's the stuff that I like. Obviously a big proponent for automation with all this AI stuff. It doesn't have to be AI, right? There's a lot of different technologies to do that too. So
Yeah, that's really cool. I think as security professionals, I think one of the few things or one of the first things that kind of like spark our interest is like the possibility of automation because of so much manual stuff that is involved in our field and just being able to like be faster and more efficient with like how we do things. But on the topic of AI and LLMs and all that stuff, what got you interested in these technologies, but actually beyond that, actually applying them to security use cases like you've been doing. I know you're a practitioner, you work in a blue team, and you're in the front lines, right? You're doing this on a day-to-day basis. But what specifically kind of like sparked your interest and led you to like the exploration to what you've been working on recently? A cybersecurity degree can be an excellent path if you're looking for cybersecurity education. That's why I'm excited to share today's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University, SNHU. Since 1932, SNHU has been innovating higher education, earning national recognition for its commitment to student success. A key part of this is its outstanding online cybersecurity program, which teaches students how to defend against cyber attacks and protect organizational data. With surprisingly affordable tuition, you can earn a cybersecurity degree covering network security, application security, incident response, investigation, and more. You gain hands-on experience in cyber labs and can participate in National Cyber League competitions. These competitions are fantastic for building practical experience and enhancing your resume. I can vouch for this personally. The NSA has designated SNHU cybersecurity program as a national center of academic excellence in cyber defense. What more could you ask for? Your courses are taught by faculty with real-world experience, giving you opportunities to connect with cybersecurity professionals who actively work in the cybersecurity industry. Visit snhu.edu/cyberwox, which is also linked in my description, or the podcast show notes to check eligibility for SNHU cybersecurity program. You might qualify for financial aid or have existing college credits that could accelerate your degree at SNHU. Thanks to SNHU for sponsoring this episode.
yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I think I myself, like a lot of people, have like their chat GPT moment, right? Which is
Yeah.
just like, this technology didn't exist for the mass public like 2 years ago. So like chat GPT was unveiled, what, like November 2022. So
Yeah.
um, I Yeah, I think I first used that. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is pretty incredible tool, right? And I know that a lot of people don't always have that experience, but the biggest thing after that was like really just using it for like your day-to-day life, or which typically could be your 9 to 5 or like your job, right? That's when I really saw how powerful it was. But it really came down to, me putting in the effort and time to, upfront to learn how to use this technology, right? I mean, if you think about it, like these chatbots, of a ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they reward power users, right? So if you really spend the time to learn how to, and we'll probably talk about this later, how to
Yeah.
prompt or that question that you give these models, like it really does drastically increase the quality of the results and stuff like that. So that's when I really started to go down the rabbit hole and spend time on this. And then from there, it's just kind of like a positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like AI, LLMs, all of those things are like definitely a different kind of technology, but I think the same approach applies to like any other technology like you might have to learn for the job or for exploration, career wise. And I think just
Yeah.
kind of like taking a passion for it and spending that time learning it and trying to apply it to your actual like cybersecurity use case. We're gonna go into Diana and like projects you've been working on, but I wanted to ask, this is something that's been kind of like I've been pondering about recently as I've been learning more about LLMs. The major thing about like AI, LLMs in general is like they are trained with a lot of data, right? They're like the whole basis of like the LLM or AI system is to like use data it's been trained on to generate specific outputs, right? So when it comes to cybersecurity, I imagine like there's definitely like some amount of training that might go into like, an LLM or whatever the case is or whatever system you're building. How does that work? Like, how do you source for like cybersecurity specific data or domain specific data or information or things that specifically are created or written or designed to help train this LLM or AI system or agents to do the specific thing you wanted to do with regards to the cybersecurity context?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's like about yeah, so the way I think of it is like this Gen AI wave is such a big deal for really two reasons. And one of them is all of a sudden, we have lowered the barrier to entry to access to these really powerful models. Like
Yeah,
anybody with a phone or a laptop can use them, right?
yeah.
But the second part is really about that we can shape the behavior of these models
Mm,
without training or changing the weights of the models, right? So like you don't have to be a machine learning expert. You don't have to get a team, stand up infrastructure, do the training, get the data, all of these big data science problems, right? And so really what that means is so these pre-trained models, like you said, are trained on these really large, massive corpuses of text, of natural language, right?
yeah.
What I've found is that for a majority of use cases, even in security, using the right tools, and I'll share a couple of them with you, but the main one is um, in context learning. So like
Mm,
there's not always a need to go and train the models. Like the pre-trained models are well equipped if
mm,
so yeah, I think of it like this. They spit out text based on two things. One is the original data it was trained on, and then what you give to the model in that context window or the query or the prompt. So
mm,
it's really a garbage in, garbage out thing, like
mm,
with a lot of technologies, right? That's the biggest theme I've seen. So if you spend the time up front to give it enough information to, like in this case, be a cybersecurity expert, or like
yeah,
giving really clear instructions.
yeah.
It doesn't really matter what domain specific expertise the models are can get pretty far just doing that. But you
Mm,
can, to your point, you can take these pre-trained models and it's called fine tune them a little bit towards specific use cases.
yeah.
There's I would check out Hugging Face is like a repository of all these models that people have gone and trained for their own custom boutique use cases, but there's quite a number of them. I think SecBert or Google has a SecPalm that are fine-tuned for just cybersecurity domain knowledge, right? So I think
Right.
that's kind of what you're getting at. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily linear. I think you should always start with these frontier state-of-the-art models. They're really, really good already.
Gotcha. I'm looking up Hugging Face right now. I think I've heard about it. And it does look like it's like has a bunch of like data sets. So that's definitely good to know. All right, so we've gone over training the models, and like just context specific stuff. I want to tangent a little bit from that before we go into what we're gonna talk about deeply. So so this is like a two-pronged question, right? I know we discussed a couple of things we had a couple of things we're gonna discuss, but I was researching some more stuff and some more ideas came to my mind, so I figured it'll be good to have a conversation about it. So the first thing is like with regards to like updates in a sense, right? And updates in information and essentially advancement in information, right? So if we look at something like a GPT, I think GPT 3 or 3.5, the information was
Yeah.
only updated up till like I think 2020 or 2022. So it only knew enough or knew up to that point in time before it was then updated. So how do you approach, or how is the industry in general approaching like keeping these different Gen AI models updated with regards to like their context, but also the second part of that question is like tuning, right? Because I imagine that there's definitely a certain level of accuracy that these things have, but how do we approach like how are you approaching fine tuning them in a way that kind of makes sure that if there's any sort of like disparity or inaccuracy, whether small or large, there's a way to kind of like improve it to not have that inaccuracy in the future. I hope that question kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So that's a good point you bring up is with these pre-trained models, like
Yeah.
so we'll like pick on OpenAI is the company that puts out like GPT 3, 3.5, GPT 4, right? And they're not up to date with the real information, right?
Mhm.
So like I think GPT 4, for example, is trained up to November of 2023, like almost a year ago,
Yeah.
right? So any new information the model doesn't know.
Yeah.
So when you run into that issue. So the first thing I do when you use the pre-trained models is test your use cases
Mhm.
to see if the model already has an idea. So like if we pick a security use case like Splunk documentation or Snort documentation, like depending on whether stuff is publicly crawled, it's available on the web.
Yeah.
Maybe that got picked up by the model and knows what it is. So test that first, because a lot of the times the pre-trained models will know it. But if you don't, so when you run into that issue, it's that then it's down to you as the user or the engineer to give that information to the model because it's not going to know. But yeah,
Mhm.
this gets to a tricky area. It's like the two. Well, the one I think the biggest problem I've heard from folks is an accuracy and hallucination thing. So like you want the model's output to be correct and to be accurate, right?
Yeah.
And so hallucination, which is just that concept of these models, really at the end of the day, they're statistical token generators. So token
Yeah.
is, in this case, you take natural language, you convert it into numbers, and these numbers sit as embeddings in this vector space, right? And
Mm.
it's really like if I say a sentence like the dog walked down the street, can that be represented as a number while retaining that information, right? So that's kind of like the backbone of this technology. But where was I going with that? So for the point being, for hallucinations, the models they love to spit out text. Like that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Whatever you ask it, like it wants to spit out those tokens, right? So the biggest tip I could give people for this is like always give the LLM an opportunity to say I don't know or give it an out,
Mm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing. But yeah, it comes down to at the end of the day, can't trust the output of the LLM, right? So you as a human expert, or maybe you have like a more deterministic way to validate something or measure its efficacy or its accuracy. That's a pretty critical step in there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a few tools out there that solve your particular question around staying up to date with stuff. So like you can check out Perplexity. Perplexity.ai is kind of
Yeah.
like a ChatGPT has access to Google, right? And I think
Yeah.
ChatGPT had Bing search at some point. So you got to play with these. Some of them could be pretty bad results. Some of them are better than others. But yeah, so then it comes down to you with tools, what you have access to give context to the model that it's just not going to know, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. No, most definitely, most definitely. And thanks for obliging me with those, tangential questions. So let's go into Diana, which is like what actually caught my eye, and one of the things we've been working on. What is Diana? Like, what sparked the idea for Diana? And what have you been working on with regards to it?
yeah, totally. So this actually started out as a capstone for my master's program, which is in cybersecurity, right? And so
Yeah.
basically, you want to find a real world problem and come up with a solution, right? So like at the time, like a bulk of my day-to-day work was like research and writing detections, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole form of expertise in itself, right? And so I kind of was sitting there and I feel like a lot of people get into these workflows of using ChatGPT or Claude to like augment their workflow, but you're still copying pasting a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so it's great to have that, but I was like, how can we get this more hands off, more integrated, right? Like the LLM has these capabilities. Why am
Mhm.
I going back and forth copying, pasting stuff? So, yeah, it was really around this whole journey of going from an idea, right? So maybe you read a blog or, there's a bunch of great open source detection rules already out there. Typically you're just out there Googling, reading stuff, going from that idea that, or like a hypothesis for detection to a finished detection rule or an analytic, right? But that takes a long time and there's a lot of steps in there. So it was really about seeing if I could find different pieces in there and offloading a lot of that work to an LLM because it caters pretty well to this sort of thing. So yeah, and then it really just became about I went down the rabbit hole of like building with LLMs, right?
Mm.
Is this technology? And yeah, it was really cool for me because, I'll remind you, like, I don't come from like a software engineering background. I'm not a developer. I'm not a machine learning or an AI expert.
Yeah.
I'm not a data scientist. So, how powerful this stuff can be if you are able to like articulate the use case you want. So, like, you and I were practitioners, we're subject matter experts in cybersecurity, right? So it's about how can you clearly articulate that and use these LLMs to kind of walk through the whole use case, if that makes sense. So yeah, that kind of was what spurred the idea for Diana. And it was
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, could I show that, let's say me or a teammate, it takes us like, I don't know, an hour up to 6 hours, depending on the complexity, to go from idea to finished detection in your environment, right? Well, can I, use a tool like Diana, we'll go over the details, to take that whole process down to like minutes, even seconds? And the answer is yes, you can.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's really great. Let's dive right into it. Are you able to show us a demo of Diana and how it works?
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, when you load up Diana, so I'll share the GitHub link. So you can, there's this front end, this thing that you're looking at is Streamlit. This is
Uh,
something I stumbled upon because it's, yeah, very popular, like building with LLMs, like fast prototyping, like sharing the tool, right? But it's really just having a UI around it. So the GitHub, you can download it locally, run the Streamlit app on your laptop, right?
yeah.
Or there's a Streamlit Community Cloud version that's a little different that you can poke into. But yeah, so there's a quick start guide here and some stuff, but really I'll just walk you through like how I would use it, right? So
Mhm.
remember the whole idea of this is we want to go from an idea for detection, which pretty typically is a form of threat intelligence, right?
Right.
And so like I know for me, like a lot of the really good content I've come across, like in the InfoSec community, I mean, anything from like Reddit or Twitter or like cybersecurity blogs you follow. Maybe it's like a postmortem or an incident from your company or stuff like that. So, you sit there and you read it, but it's at the end of the day, it's probably natural language description, right? And it's like, here's what the threat actor did, here's what the malware did, here's the evidence, right? And we take that information and we write it into a detection in
Mm.
our language of choice. So we'll just walk through an example. Do you see this Datadog blog?
Yeah, I see it.
You see it? Yeah. So if we just take this, like this is one of my favorites. This is a great one. So
Yeah. Mario was
instead
my
of reading,
previous coworker at Datadog.
oh, there you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The content from this is awesome. So in this case, we could just hit scrape URL here. Okay, so that's great there. If you want to view the content, just to check that it works, it's all in here. So you'll see I kind of put these little nuggets in here to kind of give you visibility and control into what's
Mm.
going on, right? I didn't
Yeah.
want like a black box LLM. Something goes
Yeah.
in, comes out. Like I want people to understand how this works. So
Mm.
in this case here, so on the left, so the LLM provider, there's a bunch, right? OpenAI makes ChatGPT, Anthropic. There's Bedrock and Grok. These are great. I encourage people to look at these. If I know a big cause for concern is like security data and privacy, data
Yeah.
residency, right? So you
Yeah.
can use these platforms where a lot of those boxes are already checked. But the coolest thing is like Grok, for example, the prompts that you send to the model and the responses you get back. they're ephemeral, right? They're gone. They're not stored.
Uh,
And so I would read the security policies of each vendor to figure out what works for you, especially if you're going to be using security data, right? But in this case, yeah. So you pick the provider and the model type, right? So in this case, we're going to pick Anthropic, Claude 3, HiQ. So I put a little tip in here. I found for a majority of use cases, so you have different size models, like the smaller ones typically can't handle larger computations, or like maybe the quality is not as good as the larger models, but they're
mhm.
cheaper and they're faster. But for a majority of use cases, those are really well,
Right.
work really well. So in that case, we'll just pick this to show you. But and then you pick, when writing detections, right? It all starts with one thing, it's the logs.
Yeah.
So in here, I just put a few examples. So like maybe you're working with CloudShell, Okta logs, GitLab audit logs. So this is really a filter for that threat intelligence we put in to tell the model, the tool, I only care about detections that can be written with these, right? So if you just wanted Okta, then put that in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say we'll just do
And
those.
so
Yeah.
this
And
this
then the
this
detection language, right?
this modularity is like essentially like you design this modularity, like you said, so it's not like a black box. You can actually like kind of have a level of granularity into how you want this thing to like, work with regards to the threat intelligence input.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And okay, and then the detection language. So we obviously know there's like dozens of different ways to write detections, right? There's so many vendors, tools, query languages. So I put in a couple of these. So we'll just pick, let's just do, I don't know, let's say this Sigma rules. Well, actually, I'll show, let's do Panther Python. So for folks who aren't familiar, and I'll pull in some examples. So like this detection logic is written in like Python, for example, right?
Yeah.
But it could be like a SQL query, it could be a Splunk query, Elastic, right? And so down here, this is two things. So there's information on the sides of these if you want to understand them. But for most of these cases, the temperature, I start at 0. So think of 0 is the more predictable, deterministic responses. So like we're dealing with security analytics here, right? Like we don't want the model to be super creative. Higher
Mm.
temperature is more creative, right? Like we're not writing an essay or a story. So keep the temperature on the lower end, experiment with it, right? That's why I
Yeah.
put it in here so you can actually see the changes, right? Okay, so we picked our model, the model type, our security log data, and the detection language. So we put in the threat intel. This is like what goes in, right? And so two things on the right here. And so like I want to emphasize for people when we talked about like garbage in, garbage out, right? So like if I put in here, write me a detection for when day logs into a Windows computer. Like that's a garbage prompt. Like you're gonna get a garbage answer. It's not gonna help you, right? So that just
Yeah.
shows you like you want to spend the time up front to put the information there that will set the model up for success, right? And
Yeah.
so in this case, we'll put an example detections. Like these could be detections that you already have, an example log. So like I go to,
Uh,
yeah, so here's Panther's GitHub. They have detection logic out here. So in this case, there's two things. We're going to give it one, the Python, and this
yeah.
could be Sigma rule. It could be Splunk SPL. There's other stuff out there. So for the interest of time, we'll just do one in here. So we'll paste that in there. And then we'll go back and we'll get its matching other file, which is a YAML file in this case. And so this, you can see like this contains the actual logs, right? So we get two things, one, the analytic, and one, the actual log source.
Yeah.
Um, so keep that in mind. And we've picked the detection language on the left here. It's Panther Python. So
Yeah.
these things all kind of come together, right? Yeah, and if you want to add some more stuff, the more high quality information you give to the tool and the time you spend up front, like you're going to get the more optimal results, right?
Yeah.
So in here, this is what I found, two things, the examples and you putting your steps. So like, let's say you have like an onboarding guide or for how to write detections at your company. So this is like you would put the granular step-by-step instructions
Yeah.
and get as detailed as you want. So you might already have that, plop it in here. You could, come up with something like one, like, read the threat intel, right? And then you might have something like, verify each field value name is correct according, you get the idea. So like, what are the step-by-step instructions that you would give a human, put it into the tool? That's kind of the whole point here. And you could do the same for alert triage, right? People might have SOPs or like run books that they go by for certain detections. So
Hmm.
this helps like put the analytic with the follow-up steps too. So That's all in there. So we're just going to go ahead and hit process threat intel here. And so you'll see it'll show you step by step what it's going through. So in this case, number of detections found from this Datadog article we put in there, right? So, and I put the cost in here too, so people can appreciate this too. I get
Wow.
a lot of questions around like, like these, third-party APIs, like it's expensive and stuff. Yeah, use the smaller, faster models. They're like really dirt cheap, man. So you can see in here. So, but look, we have detections found from that article, right? So suspicious AWS secrets, and you'll see here. So this is only going to show us the security log data that we put in on the left, right? It's like a
Yeah.
filter. So stuff might have been missed that's in there, but this is the whole point of that filter in there. So, but yeah, here's the whole point. It's like we know garbage in, garbage out. Like these detections are great candidates. It's going to find the detection candidates, right? Like there's log evidence already in there. If the log evidence wasn't in there and I asked you to write a detection, you'd have to look that up. Be like, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of shows you. So we can just pick let's do this. AWS API request signing. Threat actor was observed using a custom user agent. They were manually signing their AWS requests. Okay, look, CloudTrail log showing API calls. There we go. So we'll hit process detection, and then it's going to run through and create the rule. And so you'll see under each step, I put these boxes view details in here. So these are the actual prompts that are going out
Uh,
to the model. So you can see in here, look, as a detection engineer specializing in Panther in this case, right? Create a rule
mhm.
based on the following. And then, so that'll be what's sent out to the model. And then we'll see the result. This is what comes back to the model. So this is great. So you could just see what's going on to understand. Also helps with like debugging or troubleshooting for me too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, step two creates the rule, develops investigation guide. It does a QA on it. And a tip I'll show people is the LLMs I found are really good at doing QA for your specific use case, right? So each of these are independent steps, right? It's not one massive prompt that we send to ChatGPT or Claude, right?
Yeah.
It's taking each step, like you want the models to be really good at a small specialized thing and then giving the results and just chaining it together. It's like just a workflow, right? So, and then we have our final output here. So processing complete. Here's the detection. So threat description, we went over that. And then here's the actual detection rule, right? So in this case, look, so here's the logic. Define the rule, not event source equals this, or
Mhm.
not error codes equals this, right? This is the actual logic.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's, the model gives you an explanation, limitations, edge cases. These are all things we consider as detection engineers when we're writing these, right? So
Yeah.
log sources, and these could be your investigation steps that you would want to pair with for this particular alert. Some extra stuff, considerations, and then yeah, at the end here we have your overall assessment. So you can go into the GitHub and look at the prompts I put together, but
Yeah.
for the QA, you give the model like really clear criteria on what you think's a good detection or a bad detection, right? And so it comes up with this final score out of 100 to give you kind of like an idea, right? So So 86 out of 100, that's pretty good, and there's some explanation in there. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of the tool. And let me know if you have any questions, if that makes sense, the workflow.
Yeah, this is amazing. I remember OpenAI ChatGPT became openly generally available for everyone, and I was like, you know what? Let me try it out. Let me see, like, create this section using Sigma, and it was a very generic prompt. Like I'd never done prompt engineering before. Like I was very new to this. Oh, this was like in 2022 or 2023, I think,
Yeah.
early 2023, and I was just like, oh, like write a Sigma rule, and like it was it did a very great job of doing that, and it blew my mind, but now looking at what I know then and what I know now, and also looking at how this essentially takes that small action of like prompting to like even add in like various levels of granularity and even context to help with that process changes the entirety of like my understanding and like my views of like applications of like LLMs to specific security use cases. And I really like the how the approach is like it's definitely you're interacting with a computer with some software, but it also seems a little bit even like how you would prompt or train a human to do this,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
essentially give them all the context they need and everything they like that is required to like get the job done, and essentially like what is going to be important for them to actually like identify the information, create the detection. I mean, the D.I.A.N.A is doing its own assessment on itself, but ultimately someone's going to have to review this, which will probably eventually be the human. But it's really, really cool just like having all these different pieces together and then using that as a bringing that together to essentially like, achieve the goal of like turning this input of like threat intelligence with all this context into a usable output for an actual detection.
Right, right, totally. Yeah. And like that's yeah, great what you bring up about like using this to explain it just like you would for a human. So like
Yeah.
when people first start on like let's say you have an idea for like an LLM app and it's typically going to be some form of a task, right? So like
Yeah.
in this case, writing detections or threat hunting queries is complex, a bunch of steps. Like you got to ask yourself like how would you explain this to a teammate or a new coworker, right? And so like in this case, you assume that these pre-trained models, right, that we're using here, like have, more or less basic critical thinking skills, like a new
Yeah.
employee hopefully does, right? But you're bringing all those pieces together. Like here's the detection guide that we have. Here's the instructions. Here's what data you need to do this. So like sit down and write that out just like you would give to a new teammate. And yeah, if so like I would start with that. And and it's really after that, it's just chasing that accuracy. So reducing hallucinations and
Yeah.
then getting as optimal as you can on your results, right? And
Yeah.
so like take that same principle and like print out the prompt or the series of prompts, and then give it to someone like outside your department. It's like you brought someone in off the street. Could they
Yeah.
write a detection? It's like, how good are your instructions? Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
what assumptions are you making? So
Yeah.
that's kind of a fun way to like figure this out.
Yeah.
And I'll even show you. So like if we go into here's the GitHub right in here. So you can see the prompts of what's going on behind the scenes, right? So like I
Yeah.
think in this case there's 5 or 6 prompts, but you're a cybersecurity threat intel analyst, right? This is that step, like it's reading the blog or whatever you put in there, developing an investigation guide. So you can take a look at these to see, and then you'll see here, here's the QA steps. Like it's a lot. The point being, it's a lot that I put
Yeah.
into here, right? So that shows you spend time doing the prompt engineering, like you'll get some really, really good results. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, most definitely. So, you've shown us like a really, really like, amazing creation that you have here. Um, and we kind of went over some, what got you into doing this and all that stuff. If there's someone out there, that's looking at this, that's like, this is really, really cool. Like, I want to do something like this for like, maybe like some red teaming or for some vulnerability management or for like some bug bounty, whatever the case is, like whatever, for the cybersecurity, how does one get started with like learning this stuff, and, in a way that you can actually apply it to real world use cases?
yeah, totally. That's a great question. And so I actually put this together you can share out with everybody. Like I
Yeah.
tried to compile all the resources that I've come across. For me, like I said, like I don't come from a background in data science or AI or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
On how I came to learn and like iterate and build over this stuff. And so, can you see this? Okay.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just I put a resource guide together of really like just practical advice on how to use LLMs or Gen AI
Mm,
for people in the world of cybersecurity, right? Like we
yeah.
come with our form of expertise, but you might not know where to start or how to do this. So I would go to this first. I broke it up by like, must read resources, all these great blogs of people
Yeah.
who've successfully built with LLMs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cyber security specific stuff in here, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, whether you like videos, I prefer, videos sometimes over reading. There's some free courses and training in here, but yeah, I would start here and look at this.
Yeah.
This should be more than enough to get you in the right direction, and there should be plenty of resources in here. So
Yeah, that's great. This looks like a treasure trove. So I'll definitely be sharing this. But thank you so much for going to this, Dylan, and for creating this resource. As a matter of fact, I think it'll be very, very helpful for those who are trying to use it, or even like thinking of like some specific use cases that apply to their own role, whatever the case may be. That being said, how can people find you and connect with you? If they want to like learn more about what you're doing.
yeah, sure. Yeah, the easiest way to reach me is probably just LinkedIn. It's like where I hang out.
Yeah,
That's where I like try to regurgitate a lot of like the LLM stuff I find, right. Yeah, LinkedIn's the best way to reach out to me. Also, I have a company called Cyber, and so this is really what we do is give people practical advice on how to use LLMs
yeah,
for like cybersecurity use cases, right? I found that it's hard to find people who are at the intersection of these two areas of expertise, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're interested or you want to look into using this kind of technology in your products or at your company, feel free to reach out and we can chat too. So that's the best way to reach out to me.
Yeah, most definitely. I'll leave the links to your stuff in the description below. I really appreciate your time, Dylan. This has been really, really great. I'm looking forward to getting this out there and kind of spreading the word on the work you're doing and also like actual practical use cases for AI and LLMs, prompt engineering, and cybersecurity.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dave. This is fun to chat. I love this stuff, so I'll chat anytime about it. So
Yeah, most definitely. Hopefully, we can have you back sometime for even some more cooler stuff.
yeah,
All right.
awesome.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. Thank you so much for watching this episode. In the meantime, you can check out the other videos in the Detection Opportunity series over here or the next video right over here. I'll see you there.